Hi guys, I'm back with part 3 of the fatigue and sleep videos. So I left off the last one with college. I talked about sleeping long hours and sleeping on a weird schedule and having a lot of trouble getting out of bed in the morning and of course having daytime sleepiness. But at this level, I did talk about some of the issues it caused and why it led me to get a sleep study. Well, two sleep studies. I talked about all of that. But basically, it was more of an annoyance than debilitating at that point. Although it was starting to slide towards a bigger problem, it was still mostly an annoyance. I was still able to work full time. I worked at summer camps. I completed, 8 hour a day practical placements. And when I finished school, I ended up not working for an entire year out of college, which was partially my own fault because I was being too selective in applying for jobs. But that's a whole other thing. In 2013, June 2013, I got hired for another summer camp job. I hadn't done one in several years, but I had no reason to think it would be a problem. I'd done the whole on my feet all day in the heat thing. This one was different because it was way downtown. The whole reason I took this job, I had another job. Actually, I did get a job in May. It's not so. Actually, yes, that would be a year out of school when I got that job in May, and it did not work out at all. And I started looking around, and I saw this summer camp posting, and they never hire in June. They're done by June, so I knew they were desperate, and I was desperate for money, so I decided to give it a go, and I was willing to commute. And they hired me. They had someone back out at the last minute, and they basically wanted someone with two hands and a brain. So I got hired. Um, did not expect it to be an issue, and overall it went fine. I was in substantially better shape than I am now. I remember even one day staying downtown for an event after work, and I'm now just tired thinking about being out from it was 7 a.m. I left, 10 p.m. I got home. Actually, not even later than 10 even. I'm exhausted saying that sentence now, so I was in much better shape. The only thing was I was falling asleep at like 8:30 or 9 p.m., which is incredibly early for me, and I'm not entirely sure if it was my problems getting progressively worse, like was it the next step, or was it just I was hot, I was on my feet all day, I was commuting 2 hours each way. It was two buses and a subway and a streetcar to get there, and then the reverse to get back. I wouldn't even make that whole commute now. I'd be exhausted halfway. So I don't know if it was actually the next step in the progression or just my body reacting to the amount of physical stuff I was doing. Um, Either way, though, it wasn't a massive problem, just a little weird. So I'm gonna jump. I have a very weird career history that I can barely keep track of, so don't worry if you don't know what the heck I'm doing. I'm gonna jump ahead a bit. So I did that job, that summer camp job. That was July and August of 2013. And the long and short of it is, after having that on my resume, I had an easier time getting hired. And I spent the next year basically with a bunch of part time jobs pieced together. So I assume I still could have worked full time hours in that time period. In the fall of 2014, I was hired by an agency. I called myself a daycare supply teacher. I've talked about this before, where I was sent to different daycares. And in February 2015, I got an assignment at a daycare that really liked me. They asked for me all the time. They asked me for this assignment. It was 3 weeks of 8 hour days in the preschool room because one of the staff was going on vacation. I didn't think there was an issue with doing that, but about halfway through, I was too fatigued. I couldn't do my job properly. I had too much mental fog. And this was a room of 24 3-year-olds. The ratio was 1 to 8. So me and two other adults with 24 3-year-olds. You need to be alert. You need to be constantly on the move. And I was struggling, which really surprised me. Although looking back, I actually hadn't worked full-time hours since that summer camp job, that year, more than a year earlier, because I'd had that part-time stuff, and then with the agency, you often didn't work 40 hours. You might get a half day, you might not work several days. So I realized I had it, and I didn't know why, but I was struggling, and it kind of worked out. I told them I couldn't continue with that shift, but they were happy to use me for weird hours, right? Because most people doing that job want as many hours as possible. I was also receiving my government benefit, so I could afford to work shorter days. So they happily gave me, half days and after school assignments, and it actually worked out really well. And it's also a really good lesson about working within your limits, accepting your limits, finding a way to make it work instead of worrying about what society says you should be doing. There's a very good lesson in there, I must say. Um, okay, I'm looking down at notes here. So I'm gonna jump again now. So that daycare actually ended up hiring me from the agency. I left the agency and went to that daycare. And it was not full time. It was 5 hours a day, which is one of the reasons I went for the job because it was not early morning. It did not work out very well at all. I ended up in a major depressive episode. I didn't work at all for a while. And then by spring 2016, I was ready to work again. My plan had been to do part time and sort of eventually work back into full time, and that did not end up happening. The same daycare took me back, this time in a different role, where I would set the lunch tables with two other staff. I would set the lunch tables, serve the food, wash the dishes. It was only 3 hours a day though, so even though I was on my feet the whole time, I should have been able to handle it. And I started suspecting within a matter of days that something had changed because of how incredibly just exhausted I was. Struggling even more. It's hard to explain when you already felt tired. I need more words than just tired. But it was even worse in the morning, and I knew something was up. And I started suspecting fibromyalgia. My mom had been diagnosed, and I felt like what I was experiencing matched her description. Right? The main symptom is muscle aches. And I had a day where the kids were on a field trip and they asked me to wipe down some toys because there was no lunch to serve, and I ended up with a sore shoulder. I was literally sitting there with a spray bottle and a cloth wiping toys, and I ended up with a sore shoulder. So I knew something was off. And I was correct. I was later in 2016 rather. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which does cause unrefreshed sleep, it causes fatigue. And by the way, I learned recently that fatigue and sleepiness mean two different things. I've been using them interchangeably in these videos. Fatigue is like a lack of energy, you know, whereas sleepiness is you're battling to stay awake. And I actually have both those issues. I have had sleepiness issues as long as I can remember, as I've talked about. And then the fatigue kicked in 2016 with the fibromyalgia diagnosis. All right, so I developed this because not everyone with fatigue sleeps a lot or can sleep very well. So I have two, sets of things going on here. So I got the fibromyalgia diagnosis, and the plans changed. I had no idea. I was hoping it would go into remission, and I would go back to work full time, but I had no idea what was going to happen. So I pivoted towards finding some activities to basically get me out of the house, maybe bring in a little bit of money. So I was doing some respite care with a teenage girl with autism, and I was doing some volunteering a couple days a week in a cat shelter. So these were 3 hour shifts, and it was quite simple. I would get my tasks done in about the first half an hour, and then I would basically play with the cats and answer people's questions. And it went really well. For a while, I hit a plateau from like 2017 to 2019, which is a long time for me, this career history. I stuck with the cats and the babysitting or respite work, and then things got worse again. That's what happens with me. I hit a plateau, it seems, and then it gets worse again, and then I have to change it again. So what happened? Why did it get worse? Let's pick up in the next video. Thank you.